I now look at all of that as a gift and such an opportunity to teach other people to really minimize and hopefully eliminate the unnecessary suffering that so many other people are going through because they don't know how to think about their past. They don't know how to think in the present.
Mm.
And so that's what we teach. At Self-madeU, we teach people how to think of themselves as the solution. We teach people how to think about their past. We teach people how to think about their future and really like leverage it and maximize it so that today's present self starts to live a very happy, fulfilling life. We've all been taught what to think. Our whole life has been full of being taught what to think.
Right.
Teach people how to think.
Right.
And it
Absolutely.
eliminates the unnecessary suffering.
Welcome to the Relevant Development Podcast. I am your host, Juan. Today's guest is Tracy. Tracy, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. So I want you to tell me about yourself, and people will know what yourself is in a moment, but give a little bit of background of who you are, what you do, and kind of like your accomplishments for that have brought you to this pinnacle in your life.
Yeah. So I'm a certified life coach. I came to be a certified life coach in a very unconventional way. I spent 20 years in the advertising industry. So I got to work amongst the most creative people. I had the opportunity to work on some very sexy brands. I was able to climb that corporate ladder ultimately only to realize that I was an entrepreneur trying to fit into a employee's body. So it wasn't working for me. It took me almost 20 years to figure that out. But here I am today, able to tell my story and really like live out my purpose, my mission in a very big way. And it took a lot of I want to say courage, but I think it was just kind of this naive, like I'm feeling so called to do something and I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm just going to do it. And I'm here to tell the story of what it looks like when you really start to think of yourself as a solution to all of your problems, when you start to think of yourself as the way that you're going to achieve all of your goals. And when you stop thinking of yourself as kind of the common denominator to all your problems. So I was once there. I struggled with overeating and I struggled with over drinking. Both of those things were ways for me to kind of overlook or even numb the stress and the frustration and the overwhelm that I was feeling. I thought I was the common denominator. I'm like, oh, there's a problem, and I'm the common denominator, therefore I'm a problem. And
Right.
that kept me from going within to find the solution. And it had me looking outside of myself, trying to find all of the silver bullet solutions, spending way too much money, never creating sustainable results, which then just perpetuated the like negative self-talk and the way that I was feeling. So I wanted to once and for all put a stop to all of that. I had lived a very, long, and I think from the outside it looked like a very successful life, but I was suffering on the inside and I wanted to figure out, how do you solve that once and for all? And so I really took on this bigger mission of learning it for myself and then turning around and teaching it to all the other people that can relate to the way I was feeling. So I primarily attract a woman-based audience, although there are a lot of men in my audience now too, because this has unlimited applications.
Right. Right. So if I'm understanding this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, during that time of feeling like you were the problem and things like that, you were in corporate America doing the whole marketing advertisement stuff. You were
Yeah.
the entrepreneur in an employee's body, as you put it, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
On top of fighting with, I don't belong here. I know that there's something bigger and better for me. Entrepreneurship being that thing, and life coaching, things like that. So not only were you fighting on leaving, but also like I don't know if I have it in me because I'm not enough, because I feel like I'm not enough.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. And that, I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to this too, that, I had a fair amount of past trauma in my life. I was like a child product of a 1980s, early 1980s divorce. And that I made tons of meaning about myself and my worth just from that experience alone. I also lived out my childhood overweight. And so I didn't get to participate in all the things that I wanted to participate in. I felt like I was kind of this outcast. And
Mm,
so I was working so hard. And it was almost like for these unrealistic, like finish lines that I could never, ever catch up to. It felt like the finish line was always being moved on me, which
mhm.
then led to stress and overwhelm and frustration that, again, I was never taught how to deal with. And so I turned to food and alcohol. And that
Mm,
did a good job of really kind of numbing all of those
right.
stressful, unwanted feelings. I now look at all of that as a gift and such an opportunity to teach other people to really minimize and hopefully eliminate the unnecessary suffering that so many other people are going through because they don't know how to think about their past. They don't know how to think in the present. And
Mm,
so that's what we teach. At Self-madeU, we teach people how to think of themselves as the solution. We teach people how to think about their past. We teach people how to think about their future and really like leverage it and maximize it so that today's present self like starts to live a very happy, fulfilling life. And so, I think we've all been taught what to think. Our whole life has been full of being taught what to think.
right.
Teach people how to think.
Right.
And it
Absolutely.
eliminates the unnecessary suffering.
So you keep on using this phrase of, I didn't know how to think. People telling us what to think, but not how to think. What was it, or when was it when you were like, wait a minute, there's got to be a different way to this? Because I've learned, and I'm not going to nail this, and I teach on this. It's just an old slide in my slide deck, but it's a John Maxwell teaching that talks about the way you think affects what you believe, and how you believe affects your attitude, and your attitude affects all the way down to your performance. And he teaches like it all goes back to how you think. So how do you change how you think? Because I will tell you this, there are people who do believe, like I'm a big believer, and it took me a little while, but I think I found this very young. I'm not to be a victim, I can be a victor. Like, stop living in victimhood when I can say I can control my own narrative. Like, I can change my narrative. But not everybody thinks that way. Probably a lot of, maybe future clients of yours probably think that way. And it all goes back to this thinking. How do we change the way we think? Because I would assume that it's hardwired from upbringing, our experiences, things like that. Where do we start?
Yeah. So I can teach the hows all day long. And what makes it more of an applied learning and a lesson that you're actually going to like deeply resonate with is when you put yourself in this experience. You actually take yourself through the experience. So I like to teach people like about that 3-pound organ that exists in between every single person's ears. Like your brain, the neuroscience of your like makeup is really important to understand. So to answer your question, I would go back to science so that you have kind of the evidence to point back to and go, okay, that makes sense. Otherwise, I think you're likely to excuse it as rhetoric. And so I want to say, okay, here's the neuroscience of that organ that exists in between your ears. If you were to cut it straight down the middle, the left side of it is your primitive brain. Its function, primary function, is to keep you alive. It does not want to expend a lot of energy. It wants to seek pleasure and it wants to avoid pain. Those are its 3 primary tasks. Okay. Be efficient, seek pleasure, avoid pain, and ultimately just keep you alive. So it's not going to expend a lot of energy in having you think about, oh, I should keep my heart rate meeting. Oh, I should breathe right now, right? Like all of that is very,
Don't forget to breathe.
yeah, all of that is very habitual. So it thrives on routine. It thrives on habit. It keeps you from walking in front of a bus, right? Like you don't have to think real hard about that. That's all habit. So your primary primitive brain has a strong purpose. So I never want people to misunderstand me and think that it's evil, but because it was very helpful in the primitive state when it would tell you, oh my God, you better run because there's a tiger coming at you in the primitive state. Today, we are much more evolved. We don't live in a lot of danger, but yet the primitive part of our brain has not evolved to recognize that. So it offers us very dramatic thoughts that we don't think about, just like we're not thinking about the breathing or keeping our heart beating. We don't think about it. We just react to whatever it offers us.
Right.
Very habitual. So I want you to understand that the problem is it's offering you very dramatic thoughts. Often they aren't even true, and we react to them. We're not in any danger, and we're yet reacting to them. That is the problem right there. Okay. Secondly, people don't understand that the other half of their brain, that I call the prodigy brain, doctors, scientists would call it your prefrontal cortex. That part of your brain is the more extraordinary part of your brain. It is not as strong as your primitive brain because your primitive brain gets used a lot more than your prodigy brain. It's just like any other muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So the primitive brain is stronger. So by default, we are operating from that part of our brain. So a lot of my objective at Self-madeU is kind of a mental fitness routine. I want to strengthen the prodigy part of your brain so that you start operating from it, less from primitive. So that prodigy part of your brain, it actually allows you to respond. You don't react, you respond. So when you hear primitive brain narratives that, by the way, are never going to go away, they're always going to be there, and you can be thankful for that. But when you hear it, instead of reacting, you're going to respond. You're going to be like, there it is. There's that judgmental thought. There's that hypervigilant thought. There's that people-pleasing thought, right? And you're not going to react. Instead, you're going to respond. And this response looks like questioning it. Is that even true?
Right.
What else could be true?
Right.
Is that helpful? What could be helpful? Like those are great responses to a primitive brain thought versus reacting. Okay, so let's just put this into like a real world scenario. I always use, you can tell that I am a recovered overeater. So if I would walk through the kitchen and I would see a plate of cookies, my primitive brain would scream, you better eat those before somebody else does, or before they're not there. Or my primitive
Before
brain,
somebody else does is probably the one that comes into my thought process.
yeah, for being honest, that's probably what we're hearing.
Yeah.
Or, I want that, or I deserve that, or I need that, right? Like it's nothing poetic. Let's just put it that way. It's just, eat this right now because you want it. Okay. So I would eat them. I would eat one, or I'd eat the whole plate before I would realize, what the hell am I doing? I'm on a diet. I don't want to be eating these cookies. You almost start to feel like you're doing things outside of your will. Like you're like, why do I keep eating the cookies? The reason why is not because you're broken. It's because you're operating from your primitive brain, and it's not strong enough, or it's too strong. Your prodigy brain is not strong enough to even recognize that that's happening. So we work on every single day strengthening our prodigy brain so that we can recognize when that's happening. There's no shame in that happening. Again, that part of your brain has a purpose. But the fact of the matter is you're not in any danger. So you don't need to be reacting to it. You just need to recognize it. So we give all of our clients we give anybody who wants to take the assessment a saboteur assessment. so that you can really kind of familiarize yourself with which narratives you are most often listening to. So for me, having the background, the experiences, the trauma, I hear the hyper achiever narrative that says you have to be successful in order to be loved. Like it's
Mm,
some iteration of that. That's what I end up living my life from. I would say second to that is the judge, where I'm judging the heck out of myself. I'm judging other people. I'm judging circumstances. And that looks like, once I finally lose the weight, then I'll be happy. That's
mm,
what it sounds like to judge a circumstance. It's so universal. But because I know that those are the narratives that I most often live from, I can be on the lookout for it. And the more I'm aware of it, the less likely I am to react.
yeah, that's interesting. What was the assessment called?
It's just called the saboteur assessment.
And it's something that somebody else developed, you developed, or
Shirzad Shamin, he is the founder of Positive Intelligence. I am a certified coach underneath Positive Intelligence, so I can allow people to take that assessment, and it's totally free.
That's interesting. So I would love to take it. I know that you said you have a lot of women, but there's some men. I would like to be some men to do that. 'Cause I'm interested because I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach, and so doing strengths finders and so while you're saying this, I'm like, oh, what strength is this? Oh, what strength is this? And so I'm running through, but I can see how and what piqued my interest is when you're talking about what kind of a thinker you are, because I know for me, and while you're doing this, I'm thinking from my military background, police background, and I was gonna say and make the joke of like, I think the primitive brain and those thought processes go up when you have kids, especially when your kids are of age of going out. So like my son, both my boys, well, I have 3 boys, but 2 of my boys are at that age of like 15 and 14, where like tonight they're like, can we go to this football game? Can we go here? And so is gonna take us. And I'm like, car crash, child abduction, a fight. And I'm thinking about all these things, right, that haven't happened. Even when I go out to eat,
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to sit so I can see the room. And so I'm looking at my exits and I'm looking at people and I'm sizing them up. And I'm like, ooh, is this danger? Is this not? And then I had to process and say, you're out to eat, bro.
Okay.
Like nobody's out to get you.
Yeah.
Like that's a family of 5. That's a family of 6. That guy is 86 years old. He's not a threat to you. Like you spend time with your family, be here and eat. But then if something goes wrong, then my thought process is like, see, told you, like be on alert. And so I, as a veteran, starts to fight myself, and I'm way better now because, and to your point, I'm using that other side of my brain where I'm like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
This is what happens. This is how you are wired to think, but that is not correct. This is the way you need to think. Control your breathing. And so you talked about the frontal lobe, that cortex part, where when your heart rate starts to go up, then you start to have that tunnel vision. There's tunnel visions, there's tunnel hearing. And so now my mind is all over the place. My thoughts are all over the place. But if I can just control that and be a master of that side of the brain, man, it alleviates so much more stress.
Yeah. Well, so all of the saboteur narratives are stemming from your primitive brain, the part of your brain that's trying to keep you alive in a very dramatic way. The narratives that you're hearing are almost always untrue. But again, we're not
Right.
questioning them. We're just reacting to them. So it doesn't really matter. It's just the way we start to live out our life. So I want to commend you because you're right. Your prodigy brain is strong because you are recognizing these thoughts. That is huge. You have to have that awareness. That's how you can actually decide whether those thoughts are getting in the way of you living your life. So
Right.
you could be out to dinner and you could be sitting there beating yourself up over the fact that you're having these thoughts. Or you could just say, you know what? Is it a problem that I'm having these thoughts? Is it getting in the way of me living my life? The only person that gets to decide that is you.
Right.
But always like keeping the sense of control that you get to make your decisions, whether it's a problem or not. If you decide it is a problem, well, now you get to start to question that thinking. But to go back to the saboteurs, there's 10 of them. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
one thing that I love about the saboteurs is that they actually stem from your inherent strengths. So, like I said, I hear the hyperachiever narrative most often. So that keeps me very dependent on like my performance and my achievements in order to get self-respect and self-validation and attention and acceptance from other people. So the narratives that I'm hearing is like, it's never good enough. There's always room for improvement. I can't be satisfied with that. If I don't succeed, I'm a failure. I have to be the best. And it creates feelings of like depression, vulnerability, unworthiness. But here is the most interesting part of it. It's actually steeped in my inherent strengths, which happen to be I'm goal oriented, I'm adaptable, I'm self directed, I'm very capable of growing myself and others. I'm pragmatic, I'm driven. Those are the inherent strengths that are actually being overused that show up as a hyperachiever. So just through the awareness of that I'm like, literally, I am a 10 out of 10 on the hyperachiever chart. So it's easy for me to be aware of when I'm listening to it because I know that it's very relatable, it's very relevant in my life. So I'm on the lookout for it so that I'm not reacting to those dramatic thoughts. The other universal one, like I said, is the judge, where you're judging other people, like he shouldn't have done that, or he always does this, or I shouldn't have done this. So you're judging yourself, or you're judging circumstances. I'll be happy when. That creates a lot of feelings of guilt and regret, shame, disappointment. So, and it's very universal. I would say that's probably the most universal. But when you know that you have a tendency to be hearing those thoughts, you can be on the lookout for it. And instead of reacting, you can just respond. Is that even true?
Right.
Why is that true? Is that a helpful thought? And you'll quickly realize how destructive, how sabotaging those thoughts can be if you react. When you question it, you will not be reacting, you will be responding. So my framework to kind of bring all of this together, because all of this like word salad that I've just thrown out to you, your listeners are probably like, okay, lady, where do I begin? And here's how easy it is to pull all of this together. You have to think of yourself as the solution. No matter what you're doing, no matter where you're going, no matter what the goal, no matter what the problem, you can utilize yourself as the solution. So we use ELF, that acronym, as an easy way, as a framework for you to operate from. So the first step, start with a decision. S, start with a decision. Any decision. You either get to decide how it is you want to feel. You can decide what it is that you want. You can ask yourself, you can start with, the application of a day every morning. I just start with a decision. What is it that I want today? Why do I want it? Like, where am I in the context of where it is that I want to be? Great decisions to be making. And they don't have to be monumental. Maybe the decision is, I'm just going to sit down and organize my day today. It could be something very small, okay? But you start with the decision. The E is you eliminate the self-sabotage. When you realize, when you understand the neuroscience of your brain, that you have two parts of your brain that are constantly competing, and the primitive brain is much stronger, now you can actually be on the lookout for those narratives. You can remember those narratives are really destructive and that your tendency is to react to them. Just that insight alone is going to eliminate or at least limit the self-sabotage. There's a lot of other techniques within that, but that alone is going to reduce the self-sabotage. So we start with a decision, we eliminate the self-sabotage. Third, we leverage our strengths. So when you are operating from your prodigy brain, and you'll know you're operating from your prodigy brain purely from having the awareness of those limiting thoughts, of those saboteur narratives. When you have an awareness of them, you are operating from your prodigy brain, because you can't be aware of them without, like, if you're in your primitive brain, there is no awareness. It's just very reactive. Everything's knee jerk. So you know you're operating from your prodigy brain when you have that awareness. Well, now that you're in your prodigy brain, now you want to leverage the strengths that are only available to you through that part of your brain, like empathy, like discovery, like innovation, creativity, compassion. These are the strengths that are unavailable to you when you're operating from your primitive brain. They are only available to you. And when you start to leverage them, when you tap into them with intention, everything changes. You start making very fast progress towards what it is that you want, because you are actually slowing down with intention. You're asking yourself questions that create empathy, that create creativity and innovation. So here's a question. What's the most loving and compassionate thing I can tell myself right now? It's a question that you can ask yourself only when you have awareness that you're listening to a primitive brain narrative. That squashes it. It extinguishes it when you have compassion and empathy. Or discovery. You could ask yourself, what are the factors that I might not be seeing, right? But if you're in your primitive brain and you're reacting to fear, you're never going to ask yourself that question. You're never going to take the blinders off and see the peripheral. But if you ask yourself, what other factors might be involved that I'm not seeing here? Now you're in discovery mode. That's available to you from your prodigy brain. So you want to leverage those strengths. And then finally, you finish with a decision. And this is my favorite. And I think it's universally everybody's favorite, because everybody wants the actions. But finishing with the decision, what is my next best step?
Yep.
So easy. That is so easy that it's almost hard not to do.
Yeah.
I love that question. One step, because compounded, if you literally utilize yourself, every step you take, every little tiny step compounds. And before you know it, you've made a quantum leap in the direction of where it is that you want to be. So we teach this self framework. We teach it with something that's so universal and so abundant as a day. We know every person that walks this earth has that. We all have a day, right? And so I use that as the application to teach this concept of utilizing yourself. So you literally open up your self-made day planner and you start with a decision. What do I want from today? And then you reveal, what are those narratives that start to pop up? What are those limiting beliefs? What are those fear-based thoughts? And you reveal it. And then you start asking yourself the questions that lead to the strengths of your prodigy brain, like innovation, discovery, empathy. And then you finish with a decision, one step.
Right.
When compounded, these incremental steps, when compounded, they lead to hours and days and weeks and a lifetime of what it is that you want. You create what it is that you want with intention. And so we hold your hand throughout the course of your day so that you have this applied learning. You have an experience that you get to point back to and be like, dang, this does work. This is totally unconventional. This is not me relying on things outside of myself. This is me relying on my decisions, what I want, my strengths. So it works really well, and we teach it all for free. I know that, sustainable change comes from 20% insight. So I just gave you the insight, but it requires 80% application. If you want sustainable change, it requires not only insight. Insight is the books on our shelf, right?
Right.
It requires application. So that's the sneaky part of using a planner, because you're going to go back to it every single day.
Right.
Habit is built in to the self-made day, because it's going to require you to come back and keep practicing this.
For sure. And I think that's a big thing. Even with like, I tell people, you know, daily affirmations, trainings, your books are all crap. Like they don't do anything unless you have the action behind it. Like
Right.
with the self-made, journal and that part of the application, as long as it sits there and collects dust, it's not helping you.
Right.
But it's the writing, it's the action involved. If you really want something done, even then, it's that F of that first step. Open it up, write in it. I know that I started a journal and I stopped, and then when I stop, I'm like, why are things don't feel like they're moving forward? And it's like, well, you stopped all the positive things you're doing. Like, keep with what works. Like, why do we stop the things that actually work? And I think that I like that first step portion out of that whole thing is because I think we get caught up in thinking about the destination. And like even something small, like I hate to use this analogy, but I use it a lot because it's the simplest. I think a lot of people can relate to it. But like New Year's resolutions and weight loss, like people like, oh, I want to lose 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 20 pounds. But it's like 20 pounds and it's 8 weeks away. And oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do this. And they don't think like, go get the gym membership or putting your calendar on the alarm, waking up at 8 or at maybe it's at 8 o'clock at night or whatever it is. But what is your very first step? Like you don't finish the marathon at the finish line.
Right.
You start at the starting line with the first step. And like you said, it compounds. Like it goes into a mile and 2 miles and 3 miles, and then you're finished. And then not only do you feel good, yeah, you're tired, but you feel good about yourself. And then a week or two later, you're like, when's the next one? Right. So it's like you're building this momentum. So doing this SELF part of this and making that decision, it's like what you're also doing when you're doing that every single day is you're creating momentum. Because I think a lot of people want motivation, but motivation doesn't come out from the gate. Motivation comes from momentum.
Right.
And so we have to create momentum. Well, how do you create momentum? Like I can't have motivation without momentum, and I can't have momentum if I don't make my first step.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and that first step, I think what's key for a lot of people and what really like captivates people is when I tell them, and I want you to make that step so easy, it's almost hard not to do.
Right.
That like extinguishes that narrative of no pain, no gain that
Right.
I have always heard and believed, like not just in, my physical fitness routines. I literally made everything so hard. I thought anything worth having had to be hard, right? That's a bunch of BS.
Right.
That's primitive brain fear-based thought. Why does it have to be hard? It doesn't have to be hard. It
Right.
can actually be easy. It can actually be fun. So
Right.
when I say take the smallest step that is so easy, it's almost hard not to do, I mean it. Like make it comical. So when I was trying to lose weight and I had decided to integrate some sort of physical fitness, I wanted to walk on the treadmill for 100 days. I wanted to walk for about 30 minutes for 100 days. I didn't just blanket statement, I'm going to walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes for 100 days. I said, what is the easiest thing I can start with? The very first step that's
Right.
so it's hard not to do. You know what it was? It was to go downstairs and touch the treadmill and
Yeah.
turn around and walk away. That was the very first step. And it was comical and we all laughed about it. My husband, my kids, we all laughed. And I'm like, you know what? I kept the commitment. I decided that was the first step. That was so easy. It was hard not to do. And I kept the commitment.
Yep. I read
Now-
a story, did the same thing. The guy was like, he got a gym membership and he would go into the parking lot and he would just park.
Yeah.
And he did that for a couple of weeks, and then he went in and he scanned his membership card. He did that for a couple of weeks. And then but he was just putting in his brain, this is what you do at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock. This is what you do. This is what you do. And then all of a sudden, then it was like, okay, 5-minute rule. Do it for 5 minutes. And if you like it, keep going. If you don't, go home. Who cares?
It's all about the state of becoming. This is us evolving. So, of course, when you decide that you are going to like lose the weight or become physically fit and you've decided you're going to go to the gym, that guy that just drove into the parking lot, he was becoming somebody
Right.
who goes to the gym every day.
Right.
It's a process. So don't be fooling yourself into believing like no pain, no gain. I've got to make this really hard. Like that's unnecessary. That's what creates the unnecessary suffering.
Yeah. I even I got a lesson from even from what you said now, even, and to me, I'm connecting it back to two things. You said make it easy, so easy that it's almost comical not to do. And I connected that with the example that you gave of the cookies. Like, it was so easy to have the cookie. Why? Because you purchased it or you bought it. So you bought into it, and then you made it readily available and you made it visible. And the cookies were either had a picture of it. I'm thinking about Oreos. Double stuffed Oreos is my go-to. Sorry. It has either a picture on the package, or if you're really neat and organized, you take them out and you put them in your big mason jar with a top or whatever, and you can still see it through it. So not only did you make it available, you bought into it and you made it available, but it's also visual and it's accessible, right? So it was so easy to make that decision. So
Yeah.
why can't we make the decisions of, maybe your goal is to save $1,000 a year. Maybe it is to go to the gym or stop smoking, whatever it is. Spend more time with your significant other, make date nights for, as a husband and wife, spend individual time with your kids, whatever it is. Do you have buy-in? Is it readily available? Is it visible, right? Is there a picture of it? And then make it as easy as possible, just like you did the cookies. Like, I forget who says, I don't know if it's John Maxwell or somebody else, that says what is easy to do is also easy not to do. It's
Yeah.
easy for me just to stay in this chair and scroll on my phone. It's easy not to do it, but it's also easy to do it. We just have to make that first decision. I want to go back to, because I don't know when you started this
Framework.
acronym in this framework, but do you go back, and you can correct me if you had it, maybe you didn't know that you had it when you had it, but did you utilize something similar to this, or was this the epiphany kind of that you had when you left your job? Because leaving your job was a tough thing to do. I'm sure it was.
I had such a strong why behind that. And I knew that I was, like I said, an entrepreneur trying to fit into an employee's body. So I knew that I was being called for something more. And so once I made that shift and I decided I was going to create something where I could work on my own timeline from my home, being around my family more, I knew that if I tapped back into what it was that I was good at, and eventually became so clear to me that I was going to solve the problems that I was suffering most from, and it was being completely controlled by my past self. I used that identity and it hung me up in everything that I really wanted for myself. And so I needed to solve that. And so I had a life coach at the time who was helping me with a lot of mindset techniques. And I recognized how it had everything to do with me. I was out there trying to solve the wrong problem. I'm sitting there trying to solve an over drinking problem and an overeating problem. And I'm trying to get all the foods out of my house and not buy wine anymore. That's solving the wrong problem.
Right.
I used to think I was the problem. And ultimately, I was the solution. The solution was in how I was thinking about things.
Right.
And so it evolved over time, and it actually wasn't the whole self acronym. It was birthed about a year ago. And so we've now applied it. We have 10 programs under the Self-madeU umbrella. Self-Made Mind and Body is a health and wellness weight loss program that kind of put us on the map. We had, I think back in 2020, we had about 100 people sign up for that program. And we have a strong retention rate because what they learn has been applicable to everything in their life. So we get a lot of professionals that come into our membership, and they are blown away by how many applications this has. And so we've just simplified it over the course of the last 3 to 5 years. It's just become so simple. And now it was one day I woke up and I'm like, the real battle is kind of that triad of yourself. It's your past, present, and future self. And so how do you, when you know that, how do you really tap into yourself to get what it is that you want? And so that's where it was birthed from. And it has really created extraordinary results to all those people who decide they're going to use it.
If people are interested in this, where can they go for, because you mentioned the Self-madeU journal and then this program, where can people go to if they want to know more information?
Yeah. So just go to our website, www.self-made, MADE, and then it's the letter U.com. And you can join our free community. You can join Free Coaching Friday. You can join some of our free master classes. We do a master class every single month where we take the self framework and we apply it to very specific topics. So last month it was on professional achievement. This month it's on productivity. So Friday, October 27th, we have the self-made day. So how to create the perfect day where you're highly productive, but you're actually feeling in control of that day. We are teaching people for free how to do that. So you can go to selfmadeU.com, sign up for that masterclass. You'll get a little workbook that will take you through how to continue to do this day after day after day, get the reps in to really strengthen that prodigy brain, and then turn around and apply it to other areas of your life. We are just going to teach it to you under the application of a day because we know you've got one. So I want to teach people how to rely on themselves no matter what it is that they're trying to achieve or overcome.
That's awesome. So that's October 27th.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
Right. So in 2 days from now, it'll be, so sign up October 27th. What's the time on that?
9 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you sign up, you will get the recording. So if you can't make it live, no problem. You'll get the recording.
Nice. You get the recording. So before we let you go, what is something that has helped you, whether it's a book, a person, a program, a movie, a song, whatever it is, that's helped you raise the bar?
Ooh, I love psychology. So I would say Dr. Ben Hardy, he is an organizational psychologist. He has written 3 books with Dan Sullivan, who is an entrepreneurial psychologist. And they have created books. Let's see, Gap in the Game is phenomenal. Let's see, 10X is better than 2X. I think Dr. Ben Hardy just wrote Becoming Your Future Self Now. And then Who, Not How is the 3rd book that they co-authored together. So I love anything that they put out.
And then lastly, what kind of recommendation do you have to help our listeners raise the bar?
Yeah. Okay. So here's a very simple takeaway. I want you to just find some white space on your calendar today. I want you to book out 10 minutes with yourself. And I want you to ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? So you just take a couple minutes to really go within and figure out how it is that you're feeling. Put a name to that emotion, to that vibration. If you don't have a large vocabulary when it comes to emotions, there's no shame in that. You're very normal. Just Google feelings wheel. Up comes a huge list of emotions. Find what most resonates with you. So once you have it, maybe you're feeling disappointed. Then I want you to ask yourself why. Because what's super important in this is the awareness of how your thoughts are creating your feelings. When you start to realize that it's your thinking that creates your feelings, you start to recognize how much control you actually have. And that's what we do in Self-Made Day. We teach that concept and you get practical application literally on the half an hour. But for those listening who want to really, start right now, it's a great exercise to do.
So that's huge advice. Listeners, if you guys download that, I have it actually on my phone and then I have a copy on my computer and I refer to that all the time to try to work through your feelings because it changes the way you think.
Right. Changes the way you think and you start to better understand yourself.
Awesome. Before you go anywhere, you would like our listeners to follow you. Everything will be Self-madeU will be in the link in the description. If it's on YouTube, it'll be on the show notes on all the other listening platforms. But how can we follow you, get more information from you as far as any socials you want?
Yeah. So what I want people to remember is selfmadeU.com, and that will actually take you to all of our social media channels.
Got it.
We're on pretty much every one of them. So I think if you just remember selfmadeU.com, that's probably your best bet. So for all of you who are out there driving right now and going, I don't have a pen and paper, I'm not going to fill your head up with all of the handles. You will find it all if you just go to the website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Pleasure talking with you, speak with you. And thank you so much for joining me today in the Relevant Development Podcast. Remember to raise the bar and pull yourself up to that next level, but you can't get that next level unless you raise that bar. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you. Have a good day.